attendance. I just will repeat the fact that I'm calling the meeting to order on January 18th, 2022, and recording attendance. And myself, Michael Jones, is present. Javier Gonzalez is present. Larry Valabi is present, and Gershom Toriz on the board are present. And I don't see anybody else yet.
We have one parent in attendance.
I see that Imelda Hernandez is with us. Welcome. And that our consultant, Nick Driver, is present. And I think Paul's last name is Corey.
Yes,
is
correct.
with us as well. And we have Josh Ripp from the staff and Daniel Ornelas. And I think that accounts for everybody. Okay, so I guess that was the introduction of guests and attendees. Moving on to approval of the agenda. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
A motion.
Thank you, Gershom and Larry.
I'll second.
Thank you. And all those in favor of approving the agenda, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Agenda is approved. And we now will move to the public comment. And this is an opportunity for members of the community to address the board on items that are not on the agenda. The only thing that we can address at this point during the public comment are items not on the agenda. So is there any public comment? I don't see any, so we will go ahead to the DMS monthly update report.
Thank you. So you guys have, you want me to share my screen and put it up, or do you have copies available?
Let me give you the opportunity to share the screen. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Okay, let me know if you can see the summary narrative.
Could you enlarge it?
I can. So basically what we're doing, we're reporting through December 31. Last board meeting, we approved the first interim budget revision. There are two budget revisions, the original budget and 2 budget revisions during the year. The first budget revision was based on actuals through October 31. This is a mid-year report. We're 50% of the way through the year, and it's just a way to kind of see if we're on track. So as you can see in the summary here, what we're looking at is with 50% of the year gone, revenues will typically lag behind. The CDE tends to true up in the second half of the year when they adjust your P1 attendance. And that is when a lot of your restricted grants begin to flow, especially your federal funds. They don't flow early in the year. So this is totally expected. Then if we look below and we look at our expenditures, that's where you're going to see more meaningful data. So with 50% of the year through, you look at our compensation and benefits, and those tend to track pretty evenly throughout the year. And we are right where we'd expect to be. Books and supplies are slightly ahead of the year, and that is also what we would expect given that technology and curriculum you would purchase before the return of the students. So overall, everything, total expenditures are at 45% of your budget. The net operating loss at mid-year is nothing to be concerned with because we don't accrue, we operate on a cash basis. So we don't accrue all of these expected revenues that should have had come in between July and December. So the only time we accrue revenues is on June 30th, end of the year. So overall, as you watch these results through the second half of the year, you'll start to see the revenues catch up and everything will align more properly. But overall, if we watch the expenditures, that's the key number. When we look at the cash flow.
Paul, can I ask a question?
Yes,
The
you can.
last slide.
Sure.
going back to books and supplies where it says 63% of the budget's been used, I would have actually expected, like 90% of that budget to have been used, because as you said, those are items that we typically acquire at the beginning of the school year for student use through the course of the year. Did we miss budget there? Did we budget too much?
Give me 1 second to just check on something. I don't think we budgeted too much. There are areas that sometimes you'll have a little left that you watch that comes in the second half of the year. For example, I don't think nutrition is something that you guys, let me see here. Hang on 1 sec.
Yeah, there are a lot of other, there are a lot of object codes outside of strictly curriculum and materials purchases.
Yeah.
That still have yet to be paid for, including, like Paul said, our meal program. The object code for that one falls under the 4,000s expenditures, which is for like the overall summary account is the books and supplies.
So really, yes, the meal program, that tends to lag behind. There is a budget for the meal program that is not reflected there. And there are also consumable items, office supplies, other supplies, events that typically those will flow more evenly throughout the year. There are about 4 out of 7 accounts where it should be more heavily weighted towards the beginning of the year. So, but that said, there's nothing here that would strike me as anything out of the ordinary. I don't know if
Okay,
that
thank you.
answered your question.
It does. Thank you very much.
Okay. So again, here, the cash flow, the 2 things you can see here in the cash flow. Number 1 is on the cash flow, it shows you the trends that we watch. So we watch what's been actuals and then we watch what's left and how it's budgeted throughout the year to see that the actuals are on track with what our forecast is. And you can also look at materials and supplies. You can see how heavily weighted it was in the beginning, but there's still plenty for those remaining areas as well. And again, revenues, more to the point, if we look at federal revenues, you could see a big chunk of those. And I accrue a good portion of those because a lot of times they're dependent upon expenditure reporting. So we just reported at the end of December on your CARES Act ESSER funds. And it will take about 60 to 90 days for that report to generate a check issued from the CDE. So I do expect there to be a significant amount of accrual at the end of the year. But the nice thing with SEBA here, if you look at our ending cash balances and days cash on hand, it's been pretty steady all year. And then it will grow as our revenues start to increase towards this in the second half of the year. And we certainly have a comfort there. So a large accrual is not anything to be concerned about. Overall, you have an ample cash supply that will get you through the year.
Can I ask you to just give a really brief definition of accrual?
Sure. Okay, so an accrual is a revenue that is earned but not yet received and put in your bank. So when the fiscal year ends on June 30, the CDE will release apportionment schedules, the final ones that says SEBA had earned, say, $100,000 in Title I, but has only received 60,000. We still owe them 40. And for whatever reason, the CDE, the machinery that works can be slower. So that 40,000 is technically revenues that were assigned, allocated to SEBA for this fiscal year, but not yet received. So at the end of the year, these are all the revenues that we would then accrue that you've earned, that would be apportioned to you, but you had not yet put in the bank, that the CDE has not yet technically given you a check.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, and like LCFF, you tend to lag a month behind. So there should be 1 month of LCFF that would be accrued because it goes from the CDE to the county, then the county cuts the check to you guys. So by the time you get it, it could be July. All right. So same with expenditures would be, we might have a half of a month of payroll left or a variety of things where bills come in that are dated June 30 that were not received and paid until July. So those would in effect be AP accruals as well. So, but overall, the only thing you worry about with the accruals on revenue is that you have cash to get you through the year, and you do. And this is your balance sheet. The balance sheet just shows you what you own as your cash on hand, $2.8 million. We still are owed $215,000 in receivables from the prior year. And again, sometimes I notice CDE is a little slower these days, and it's probably pandemic related.
It could also be SB 740.
It's a big chunk too. And that one does take some time. Your fixed assets, and then this is all of the liabilities of what you owe. So if you really look at what you have in cash on hand, and if you look at what you owe in short-term liabilities of 46,000, that's nothing. And then, you know, your current loan. And overall, you have a reserve, a fund balance, $6.3 million. And again, that loss is nothing to be concerned with until we get to the year end. So if there's any questions, this is just the mid-year report. We'll be coming back to you probably in your early March meeting with a second interim budget revision, and that will be the final budget revision of the year. So we'll look at where we at through 7 months through January 31, make some tweaks and adjustments for things that might need to be shifted around, and then present it to the board for approval.
Paul, were there any surprises in the governor's budget announcement of a week ago or so for education?
Not surprises, I would say. I'm still digging in the details. We usually attend a few sessions that School Services of California puts out where I get more details. There was a nice jump, COLA increase, talk of protecting charters, but we haven't seen all the details yet, but nothing out of the ordinary that shocked me. They're saying the right things. We'll see what actually passes. Remember, this is the initial proposal. Then we have 6 months of debate, and whatever happens then in June is the final budget. Could be vastly different, but generally this gives you an idea of what they're looking at as far as the big structure and what they want to accomplish. So Governor Newsom has done a lot. Special ed is a very big piece of his legislation that he likes to supplement. And he's trying to restore the funding from where it was before and build it up more. The COLAs have been pretty significant. So
Right.
okay, I can report more on that probably in February. I'll have more details.
Very good.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I'll also be, Paul, attending a workshop with our county tomorrow.
Okay.
Get an update from some of their advisors that they have at the Capitol to give us a more detailed look into what is proposed in the January budget.
Okay.
But like you said, I mean, it could be what it is right now, but it will likely change by May revise.
Yo, it will change a bit, that's for sure. How much, we don't know. Any other questions?
Okay, hearing no other questions. Paul, thank you very much for your report.
Pleasure.
And we will now move ahead to the operations report, which I suppose is Daniel.
That's correct.
Yes.
Right.
My screen here as well. I'm just gonna give a quick attendance update. We reported our attendance through December 3rd to the county and district. So like I said, attendance through December 3rd, starting from the beginning of the year, we reported an ADA of 488.85. That's a little bit lower than we anticipated coming into the school year, but given illnesses, students out due to quarantine, isolation, that's where we land. When we met, I want to say for December, we had an updated projected ADA projection of 490.95, and that was given our assumptions at the time, given our enrollment and our attendance trends, which we'll kind of get into a little bit later. I can report that our current enrollment is higher than it was in October, and even in December. We brought in some new students this semester. We had enrolled new students in the cohort 2. So our enrollment is up. We could say that our projection for ADA, given our current attendance trend, might be higher than this first interim, but I'd hate to say that, especially right now, given some of the challenges that the Omicron variant has brought to our schools. But Josh will get into a little bit of detail with that in his update. On the next slide, so this next slide, I kind of want to, it's kind of hard timing it out. But I kind of want to present to the board our enrollment comparison, our attendance, basically our enrollment and attendance trends over the last 5 years when it comes to comparing it to this school year. Specifically because we did get a memo from the district that will bring up in the actions regarding our multi-year projection of our enrollment assumptions. So I'm going to start here, going back 5 years ago, 16, 17. That was the year in which we saw water intrusion February, March. A big part of our assumptions for our enrollment between now and the next 3 years is the overall number of applications that we get. So every year we fill seats more or less in the 6th grade after we've lost our 12th graders from the previous year. So for the district's purposes and as well as for our bank's purposes, they want to see that we have applications coming in, because ultimately if we don't have 525 students, which is our maximum enrollment, we're going to want to try to do what we can to bring more students in. So that way we bring our ADA, our revenue driving source, as high as we can get it, that fits the program. So if we look at the total applications collected over the last 5 years, 16, 17, we had a great year of total 228 applications, 204 the year after that, 225, 192, and this is the applications going into this school year. So this number of applications where we dropped from 225 to 192 was pre-pandemic. This is going into the July start of the 1920 school year. So any changes thereafter, we can likely partially attribute to some of these challenges that we were facing. So the next year, after we dipped down to 192, we went to 155 and then 116 for this school year. So just to give a bit of context as to where we're at with total applications, so that way when we have a discussion about overall enrollment and how we project our enrollment over the next few years, we have that bit of context. Down here, I have our October enrollment that we report and shows up in our school dashboard of every school year. So we try to start at 525 every school year, and by October time, we will have lost a few students, maybe due to the 8th and 9th grade transition, where some students choose to go to the school, to the local high schools. But our enrollment has kind of more or less been in the 510 to 515 range. So 509 here, 513, 517, 523. This is likely when we try to backfill as soon as we can when we start to lose some of the students. 533, even though our max enrollment is 525, this was due to the distance learning school year of 2021. We didn't really lose any students. It wasn't an issue because we weren't in the facility. And then this year, by October, we ended up at 511. Right now, we sit at 518. So I guess part of my issue with trying to base assumptions on a one-day static enrollment like data pieces, like we had 511 that day, we have 518 now. So our actual enrollment kind of varies, and that's why the next slide I want to look at the ADA, because that's ultimately the average number of students we have in our facility every day for that school year. So I have the average daily attendance percentage over the last 5 years. We're pretty consistent around 96.4, 96.5. This school year we have 94.86, and like I mentioned before, that's due in large part to having students out for quarantine, isolation related to COVID, illnesses. That's actually a bit higher than I thought where we would be. So I'm actually pleased with that attendance percentage number. So looking at the ADA, which, like I said, drives our revenues. This year was the year that we had the water intrusion. This is the official reported number at April. We actually got it up to 490.92 with a waiver that we applied for with the state. The next year, the next year we went up to 492. Year 3, which is, this is kind of the ADA that we typically project. This is around 96.5% of 515, which is like right around what I would say is like our average. This is my conservative estimate on a typical year. And then our ADA went up because they started counting our ADA as of February of 2019, and they held it static last school year. So this year we're at 490.95, due in part to, you know, not have as many kids on an average basis, daily basis. The next slide, just because it was mentioned in the memo, we'll get to the memo later, was looking at our unduplicated percentage, and this is the percentage of students that are disadvantaged. ELs, English learners, socioeconomically disadvantaged students, and then foster and homeless students. So this is the overall percentage each year of our student population that fall under that category. So typically we're looking at 83 to 85% at SEBA. And I wanted to show the district's percentage because for a chunk of our funding, it's either SEBA's percentage or the lower, it's the lower of SEBA's and the district's percentages. So our goal is typically to see if we can get a higher percentage than the district, because ultimately that leads us to the maximum amount of funding we can get. So our percentages over the last 5 years have been pretty solid, over 80, 83, 84, 85%. This year was a little different, due in part to challenges of meals being free for every family, which is amazing. Like I'm really happy that we're able to give meals to every student who wants it for free.
Do you want to talk about how that impacts our socioeconomically disadvantaged number?
Yes. So a lot of our, basically in order for us to claim that we have a student population that is, that falls under unduplicated, they're likely English learner, socioeconomically disadvantaged, foster and homeless. For the purposes of identifying who is socioeconomically disadvantaged, we need to get meal applications in from all our families. This year, given that there's not necessarily an incentive of having a free lunch, because everybody's getting a free lunch, we didn't really get as many applications as we would have liked to. So our percentage went down, but given that it's close to 80%, and given that 80% is close to more or less what the district has been averaging, I think that's a good number for us, and I'm hoping we can get that a bit higher next year. But
Daniel, just to reiterate, make sure I understand you correctly, what you're saying is that in the past, our economically disadvantaged students number is calculated based on the number of free and reduced lunch applications we get.
yeah,
This year, because the governor made meals free for everybody, it meant that there was no incentive or motivation for parents to make that application.
correct.
It means that our economically disadvantaged number goes down, which then means we get less money for those students.
Yes and no. So there's a portion of our funding that is determined directly due to this percentage, but another portion of our funding is based on whether or not the lower of the two percentages. So if our number is 70% and the district's number is 75%, they'll fund us based on the 70% of students that we have. So that's why our goal is typically to get a bit higher than what we feel the district's percentage will be, because ultimately we'll be funded on the lower percentage. So given that we're close to 79%, and that looks to be more or less the rough average of what the district might be, we might not lose a ton of funding if at all.
And could you just give a short, concise definition of what unduplicated means?
Yeah, so basically, unduplicated means we have a lot of students that could fall under English learner, they could fall under socioeconomic disadvantage, they could fall under foster and homeless. Some of them might have one or two of those attributes tied to them, and the term unduplicated means like just the full list of students that have one of those that fall under one of those categories. So if a student falls under one of those categories, they're counted as unduplicated. So then we'll take the total number of students that fall in any one of those categories, divide that by your enrollment, and that's where you get these percentages.
So does that mean if a student is identified as economically disadvantaged and they're an English learner, they only get counted once?
Once, yep,
Thank you.
thank you. That's about all I have. I just wanted to show this as context.
Can I just comment that there's a bill winding its way through the legislature now that would eliminate the ADA and just pay schools based upon the number of students, the enrollment. Don't know if it's going to pass, but California is one of only 6 or 7 states in the country that does it the way it does now, which is onerous, to say the least, for schools and school districts. So I think we all should be hoping that that bill will pass and get signed by the governor. The other thing, just building off of what Paul said earlier, that was teased in the budget, proposed budget by Newsom, was a way to make schools and districts hold harmless. Right now, school districts are held harmless and therefore get paid for last year's number of students. And if their current year is much lower, charter schools are not held harmless and get paid on the exact amount that they of students that they have, or the ADA they have. There is a strong possibility, because districts want a 2-year harmless, that charter schools would get at least a 1-year hold harmless starting next year, and therefore get presumably more money than they do now, because it would be based upon the previous year's funding. So exciting, no guarantees, but there's a strong possibility of that happening, since districts also want something, and because there's a record number of dollars in the governor's budget. This year's budget was by far and away the largest budget in state history. So the governor has quite a bit, and the legislature have quite a bit of money to play with.
Thanks, Nick. Any other questions for Daniel? Or Daniel, do you have anything else in your report?
No, other than just to follow up on the unduplicated and meal application process next year. Well, this year they made it I guess a one-time thing to make all meals free for this school year, but I think they're really pushing for that to be the norm moving forward, which is a positive for our students.
Yeah, it'd be a wonderful thing if we didn't have to spend all this time calculating average daily attendance. And
That too.
yeah, all right. Any other questions for Daniel? Then let's move on to the next report from our head of school, Josh.
All right. Can you see my screen okay?
Yep.
All right. So I'm going to talk about 4 items today. Our winter 22 PD briefly, Q3 COVID and attendance updates. So we started school last Wednesday. I'll give you an update about how that's going. Our OR goals, specifically our academic program. We recently administered the STAR exam, and so I can show you how our students are progressing in that. And then so a snapshot of student discipline update. We've talked about this the past couple of meetings and got some numbers from the semester 1. And also I'm going to overview what the difference is between a minor incident and office referral that was requested I think twice during these meetings. So start off, we had PD for teachers and staff on Monday and Tuesday of last week. Monday, we went over special education disability categories and IEP meeting logistics. It was informative because people could see why is a particular student qualifying for an IEP. And then even if they know the disability category, that can actually mean a number of different specific disabilities. So we had some learning opportunities around that. We took a look at how we are doing with our multi-tiered system of support, and specifically data updates. So how are students who are receiving tier 2 or tier 3 services doing when it comes to attendance, grades, and behavioral referrals, and seeing if we're making an impact on some of the actions that we're taking. And then we took a look at our 5-star point system, which is what we're using to reward students for positive behaviors. And we came up with a plan to have a student store in our cafeteria for the second semester in which students can exchange their 5-star points for different items in the student store to try and make that come a little bit more alive. And then on day 2, we took a look at our instructional materials and the block period and how we're utilizing those instructional materials during the block period. Just as a reminder, we adopted instructional materials in nearly every subject area, grades 6 through 12 last year. And that was a result of the federal program monitoring that stated that we needed to adopt these materials. So we're continuing to pursue those and implement those in the classrooms across the board. We took a look at our STAR results and then identified students in each of the grade levels who are in need of urgent intervention. That's the STAR language that they use, and figure out a way of providing interventions either in the class or through FAST-40 for students who are at need. And then finally, we discussed plans for designated ELD and silent sustained reading. One of the outcomes there is we're likely going to adopt accelerated reader within the next month, and we'll be implementing that. And there'll probably be some changes to these 2 classes that we have at the middle school once accelerated reader is fully on board. So that was our overview of our staff PD when we started up the new school year or the new semester. Moving on to our second agenda item, COVID. So we've all seen COVID a lot in the news recently, and I just wanted to kind of give a snapshot in time. So we had school Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of last week. Students out with illness was 56 on Wednesday, 51 on Thursday, 59 on Friday. 33 of those were confirmed COVID cases. Students traveling. So we have a lot of students still traveling. It's common for students to travel to Mexico during the winter holiday. And oftentimes they might take a few days to a week after to get back to school. And so those are our numbers Wednesday through Friday, 29, 24, and 19 students. We have the benefit of having a nurse. We are contracting this nurse at 20% time through the county, and we were able to update all of our vaccine records. It's been funny just because we've been on distance learning the last year and a half, so everything has kind of been upside down, but we were able to go through all of our students' records, 6 through 12, determine who is needing a vaccine. And I'm not talking about COVID vaccine, just this typical Tdap type vaccines, other vaccines that are required for school. Send out notices saying we need to see their vaccination update, and we're down to just 3 students who are awaiting their final vaccines, and then we'll have 100% on our vaccinations, which is great. And then we had a few students, 18 Wednesday and then 16 Thursday and Friday, who were unverified, meaning they missed school, but it was not indicated why. So that leaves us with a total student absences of 120 on Wednesday, 100 on Thursday, and 103 on Friday. I put in, since Daniel talked about the ADA, ADA stands for average daily attendance, I put in that number next to those student absences. So if we were to just take Wednesday, January 12th, our ADA was 77%, Thursday was 81, and Friday is 80. So significantly lower than what we've seen so far. If you remember Daniel's presentation, we were at 94 through the first semester, which really, all things considered, is excellent. And I'm hoping as Omicron kind of passes through our community, I'm hoping that we'll see these numbers tick back up to 94, 95% by mid-February. And then finally, also been in the news a lot, staff absences. So we've had teachers out, not necessarily for illness, but 3 teachers and 8 staff Wednesday, 3 and 8 Thursday, and then 5 and 9 on Friday. So that's how we're looking for attendance to start off the new school year or the new semester. We haven't, we've had all of our classes covered. And we haven't had any like shut down any classes or have classes going covered. So it's a lot of times just people pitching in a lot of different ways to make sure every class is covered every day. Any questions about that?
Hey, Janie asked a question in the chat room about contact tracing. Are you guys doing contact tracing? And
Yes. So every time that somebody tests positive, we send out an exposure notice to the people who were exposed to the person who was tested positive. And then they all will participate in a modified quarantine if they're vaccinated. And if they're if they're unvaccinated, and then they have to follow a testing schedule based on that quarantine procedure. But we are doing student contact tracing. There was a suggestion made by the county superintendent that we go away from that because of the prevalence in the COVID community. This morning, and we had a big meeting about that with the superintendents and some of the charter leaders. But then it was decided that we're not going to do that. Now we're going to continue with the practice that we had in the fall, which was test regularly. So right now, everybody tests once a week. And if a positive test comes up, we identify that. We don't reveal that student's name to anyone, but then we'll figure out what grade they're in, do contact tracing, and then let everybody who's been exposed know that they were in close contact with somebody who was COVID positive.
so how many
By
hours?
close-
Sorry, go ahead.
By close contact, do you mean anybody in the classroom or the people that sit immediately around the student?
Great question. So the technical rule is less than 6 feet for greater than 15 minutes. We decided, since rather than trying to measure all that out, if you're in the same classroom, then you are considered a close contact.
So how much time are you spending daily on contact tracing?
A fair amount of time. We've gotten a lot better at it. We're more efficient at it, but probably 2 hours daily between tests, the whole COVID infrastructure. So we're talking testing, follow-up phone calls, contact tracing. There's a number of parts to it, but we have, we're trying to delegate responsibilities, and we've got a good team working on it right now.
When you're ahead of the game, I have two really good friends who are middle school principals, one of them in Sunnyvale and the other one in Boston. And they're both spending between 5 and 6 hours every day on contact tracing.
I believe it. In some ways it's easier, like in the high school, if it's for the most part, we can kind of just track, okay, is it a ninth grader? And then we can say, okay, exposure letter is going to go out to the ninth graders. And if they had one class that's 10th grade, I mean, there's as you do more and more of these, you start to learn efficiencies, basically, is what we've learned over the past year. Any other questions? All right, moving on to next up. So monthly, we talk about SEBA organizational goals. So we have goals around our facility, goals around our student engagement, student culture. This month, I wanted to take a look at our academic program. And so over here on the left-hand side, we have what our goals are, which are 80% of our students meeting UC entrance requirements. I put a check next to that. That'll be fully completed once students graduate in June, but they're all enrolled in classes necessary to meet that, in passing classes necessary to meet that goal. Curriculum adoption, teachers are using instructional materials daily in their classroom. We talked about it during PD. And, it's just something, we're kind of learning how to utilize those while also balancing and kind of making it their own and making it culturally relevant. So it's been a process this year, but that's definitely happening in the classrooms. A third goal for SEBA this year for our academic program was to implement a norm reference internal assessment. We chose Renaissance Star for English and math, or reading and math, really. And I'm going to show you those slides in just a second and show you how we've done on 2 of those administrations. Vertical alignment is talking about, does our, say, grade 6 through grade 12 curriculum in English align with itself, and grade 6 through 12 in math, or grade 6 through 12 in science. That's what is vertical alignment. In utilizing the instructional materials consistently, a lot of that vertical alignment will take place, but I put a slash mark there, a dash mark there, because I can't say that we've really reached that goal yet. We are making progress towards it, but we're not there yet. And then 50% of the students proficient or advanced on state assessments. Our STAR scores indicated that we are not meeting that mark, and I'll show you those in a little bit, but we are seeing growth. I kind of wish we would have written that one as a growth mark rather than just meeting proficiency, but we can revisit that again next year. And then the final two were unable, so 95% of our students graduate on time. We'll know about that at the end of the school year. And same with 90% of our students accepted and matriculated into a post-secondary program. We'll then know about that probably by April of this school year. So with all that said, I want to go over our STAR scores now. So I'm going to open these up. Okay, so this is fall to winter by grade level. So we took the STAR exam in August, and then we took it again in December. So the August administration was fall, and the winter administration was December. And so what you see here is 6th grade fall, this bar, and there's 4 different colors. The bottom color is standard not met. The slightly lighter blue color is standard nearly met. And then the lighter blue color still is standard met. And then finally, we have standard exceeded. You can see this line that goes across the screen here. Sometimes people will call it an iceberg chart because you can see the number of students who are meeting the standard above that line and students who are nearing the standard but not quite there yet below that line. So we see just at a quick glance, the majority of our students are below the standard, but that's not necessarily, this is a snapshot in time and it's really about growth. So are we seeing, say, less students in 6th grade being at this level 1 category or not meeting the standard? And we do. We see we've gone from 42% in that category to 38. And then we see 43 to 38. And then we saw growth. So we went from 10% to 22% of students meeting the standard, which is great. We did lose that last 4%, but we still saw growth overall in terms of the number of students meeting the standard. And so you can kind of play that pattern out and looking at this presentation in 7th grade. Again, we see growth from fall to winter, more students meeting the standard, and also students, less students in not meeting the standard at this bottom level 1. And then in 8th grade, more static. And again, this is reading. In 8th grade, well, we did have we had more students achieve the standard exceeded up here. And then we had more students also go to this nearly met standard and less students in the did not meet standard. And then progressing forward from here, we can see 9th grade reading. Again, we're seeing slight growth. 10th grade, likewise, 25 to 31, and then 2 to 4, and then 12th grade, or excuse me, 11th grade, 25 to 24. And so fairly consistent there in terms of our scores. Any questions about our reading scores fall to winter? Okay.
Hi, Josh. This is Anna. I have a question. Just compared to like other years, is this pretty much the same, or are we seeing like greater drops since the pandemic? Or
I would say the biggest notable effect is our total number of students who are at the standard is down from previous years. In terms of growth, the growth has been pretty consistent from previous years. But it's a little bit apples and oranges because it is MAP compared to STAR. So they're 2 different assessments. But in a typical year in the past, we've seen more around 40 to 50% of our students meeting the standard. And so this is a little bit down from there. Obviously, we've had the COVID pandemic in the interim.
thank you.
So now if we go to math, we start over here in 6th grade. 63% of our students were at a level 1 when they started with us, and then around 7% of our students were meeting the standard or above. And we see what we're seeing a lot of growth. Less than half of our students are not meeting the standard now, and then we're seeing a lot more in these categories 2, 3, and 4 in 6th grade. In 7th grade, again, going from 52% not meeting the standard in 6th grade or in 7th grade down to 33%. And then we're seeing considerable growth here going from about 17% up to about 24% who are meeting the standard, a quarter of the class. 8th grade, less students at a level 1, more students at a level 2. And we're also seeing growth here at both 3. Well, the total amount of students who are meeting the standard, we did see a little bit of drop off between 12 to 6 in grade, so students exceeding in 8th grade math. Then in 9th grade, it was actually really consistent in math. So we saw 9th grade fall to 9th grade winter. The numbers were identical. 9th grade fall, 9th grade winter, students that were nearing the standard, identical. And then actually a slight drop off for students meeting the standard and a slight increase in students exceeding the standard. So it kind of balances out in terms of students who are at standard or above. And if we go to 10th grade, less students at a level 1, so improvement there. Less students at level 2 or nearing the standard, and then students meeting the standard or exceeding, we're seeing considerable growth there, especially this is pretty impressive, 19% of our students exceeding the standard in 10th grade math.
That's incredibly impressive. How do you explain that? I mean, do you have a 10th grade math teacher that's a whiz?
She's been with us for a while now. What's kind of an anomaly is it's the same teacher in both 9th grade and 10th grade. So I couldn't say it's one thing. We do have the 10th grade students in math every day. Oh, actually, you know what? I misspoke. So our 10th grade students, it's not the same teacher. Our teacher in 10th grade has been with us for 4 years. So I think it's a little bit of experience with STABA students and kind of students getting to know her and her getting to know the students. And she also has them every day, which I think that's probably a sizable effect in this. Whereas in 9th grade, they have the math class every other day.
Yeah, I noticed that as well with the previous slide. 10th did have a pretty good jump in that
Yeah.
one as well.
That would
Josh,
go ahead.
what percentage of the students in 9th grade are students who are new to SABA that are coming in from other schools?
Less than 5%.
Oh, less than 5%. Huh.
Very few.
Okay.
Yeah. And then finally, 11th grade, we also see a growth here, 17 to 28 and 3 to 5. So, you know, over or just about a third of our students are meeting standard or exceeding the standard, which is great. So that is
It's
our,
nice. In my recollection from previous years is that we would, at this point of the year, see backward trend from fall to winter. And it was a different measurement then, I guess, but it's nice to see that there's positive growth, and it's really nice to see the performance up in 10th and 11th grade.
Mhm.
I agree.
Josh, I have a question. So the seniors do not take this exam, correct?
Right.
So it's only 6
Yes,
to 11? Okay.
correct. All right, so now we're going to take a look at our target subgroups. So our first target subgroup is students with disabilities. So this is a student who has a disability and has qualified for what's called an IEP or individualized education plan. And it's the same marking. So not met, nearly met, met, exceeded. And then we can see how all students did in grade 6 and compare that to students with disabilities did. And so this kind of paints a different picture where we see about 22% of our students were meeting standard in grade 6. And fortunately, none of our students with disabilities met standard in grade 6, according to the STAR exam.
Josh, when you say all students, does that also include the students with disabilities?
Yes. So this is yes. And then the next bar is comparing just the 6th graders with disabilities. And then we take a look at the 7th graders, just the 7th graders with disabilities in 8th grade.
It'd be interesting to see the difference, which it would just make it larger if you took the students with disabilities out of the all population. So you're comparing two different things.
Oh, yeah, that would be interesting. So yeah, it's, some of these are tough to look at. So like grade 7, again, this is reading. We go from all students, about 28% or so are at or above standard. Comparing that to standard students with disabilities, 20% of students are at or above standard for students with disabilities, but then we have a large chunk here in reading, at least, that scored in the not meeting standard category. Then we go on to 8th grade reading, and this is where we'll see the 29 or so % of students meeting or exceeding standards, and then students with disabilities compared to that, and we see a large chunk of the students at the not meeting standard or nearly meeting standard. And we could go on here, so we can see 9th grade, and we can compare 10th grade, and we can compare in 11th grade, and we can compare, and it's essentially the same story, which is about a quarter to a third of our students overall meet the standard or exceed the standard. And then somewhere between 80 and 90% of our students do not meet the standard in terms of students with disabilities in reading. Any questions?
I know we had a nice presentation by our special ed staff at a previous meeting. But if the special ed staff were here tonight, and they were seeing these results, what would they attribute the performance to? Would it be the impact of the disability that the student has? Would it be how the student is able to function under the pandemic? Or are there other factors that play into this?
I think it would be everything you just described. So it's, in some cases, definitely the disability plays into this. There needs to be an academic need to even qualify for an individualized education plan. So it's almost by definition, there's going to be some need there. But that's not to say that students with IEPs should not be able to meet the standard in large part. I also think, we always want, so when I said, okay, I want to see these, I asked for this particular slide exactly like this. I think another slide that I don't have in here would be to look at growth over time to see, okay, we know that students might not be meeting the standard in this particular target subgroup, students with disabilities, but are those students growing from wherever they were at? And so that might be another way to look at this.
Josh, do you know at the top of your head what percentage of our students population are students with disabilities?
11%.
Thank you.
And given that it's 7 different grade levels, I mean, all it could take is just one student to be above, or just like one student to move from one rung to the one above, and it looks a lot more representative of what we have.
Yeah, very true. Okay, so then we're going to go to math. Again, students with disabilities. So we can see all students in the grade level and compare that to students with disabilities. So again, here in 6th grade, we see that no one met or exceeded the standard, and about 3/4 of the students were not at standard. In 7th grade, again, we see in math, approximately 1/4 of the students are meeting standard, and then approximately 2/3, a little bit less, are 60% are level 1, and 40% are nearing the standard. Grade 8, we have about 29% who are meeting or exceeding the standard overall, and then students with disabilities, 100% of them scored in the not meeting standard category in math. In 9th grade, same story, 23% meeting or exceeding overall. Our students with disabilities, 100% not meeting the standard. 10th grade, a little bit better. We see 11%. And so this is kind of what Daniel was pointing at. If one student scores well, or two students score well on, say, math or reading, it can really change like this is likely one or two students
Out of 9.
out of 9. Yeah, so one student scoring in the meeting standard category. And so that's why we see that 11% there, but then the rest are all scoring in the not standard not met category.
So then there's approximately 8 to 10 kids in each of these bars, right?
Yes.
So one kid does make a huge difference.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Moving on. So our next target subgroup is our Renaissance Star reading socioeconomically disadvantaged. And just a little side note here, Daniel in his presentation earlier talked about unduplicated count. Students with disabilities do not count towards our unduplicated count, but the next 3 target subgroups do. And this is our first one, so socioeconomically disadvantaged. And we can compare our students overall. And if you remember, I think our overall students that are socioeconomically disadvantaged is right around 80% this year. That was the free and reduced lunch apps that we were looking at, so right under 80. So quite a few are, and then we're going to compare that to all of the students, so 100% of the students. And so we can see all grade 6, and then a slight drop off in terms of students who are socioeconomically disadvantaged. All grade 7 here, and this is reading. And then we see a slight drop off. So more students at level 1, less students at level 2. And then actually, this is interesting. We actually do better in terms of students meeting or exceeding the standards that are socioeconomically disadvantaged in our reading score for 7th grade. 8th grade, we see pretty static. It's fairly similar, 32 to 33, 38 to 39, 20 to 20, 8 to 7. So kind of mirror images of one another in terms of all students versus students who are socioeconomically disadvantaged. 9th grade, similar story, 50 to 55, 23 to 18, 20 to 20, and 5 to 5. So pretty close, all students compared to students who are economically disadvantaged. 10th grade, we see 21 to 22, so about the same. Less students who are at that nearly met compared to all. More students who are meeting standard in 10th grade in reading, and actually more who are exceeding the standard just barely. So that's probably one student there, but still. So that's great to see. And then 11th grade, 24 to 26, so slightly more students who are economically disadvantaged scoring at a standard not met category. Slightly less students scoring at a standard nearly met category for students who are socioeconomically disadvantaged in reading in 11th grade. And then in standard met, we'll see a slight drop off from standard met, but then a slight increase in terms of standard exceeded. Any questions about our reading scores for our socioeconomically disadvantaged students? Next up, we're going to take a look at math for our socioeconomically disadvantaged students. So we see all students again. We can compare that to students who are socioeconomically disadvantaged and see that there's an increase in students scoring a level 1 or standard not met, a decrease in students scoring a level 2 or standard nearly met, and then a decrease in students at level 3 or standard met, and also, well, slight increase in terms of students who are exceeding 2% to 1.47. 7th grade, interestingly, in 7th grade math, the percentage of students of all of our student population who scored a standard not met was actually more than students who scored socioeconomically disadvantaged. So this is kind of interesting. We have 10% less, well, 10 percentage points less in level 1, 7th grade math, and then more students scoring in the standard nearly met, and then more students scoring in the standard met, and also more students scoring in the standard exceeded category. for our socioeconomically disadvantaged students. So that's interesting to see there. Grade 8, more of a mirror, so 40 to 42, 29 to 29, 22, slight drop off to 19, and then 6% of our students all of our students in 8th grade scored exceeding standard. And then for our socioeconomically disadvantaged students, 8% of them, or nearly 9% of them did. 9th grade, again, we'll see, and this is in math, increase of students who scoring a level 1, decrease in students scoring a level 2, decrease in students who show level 3 or met, and an increase in students who scored standard exceeded or level 4.
Unknown caller.
Sorry about that. And then 10th grade, what we'll see is 20, so about the same, 30 to 29, 27 to 27, 23.2 to 22.5, and then 19 to 20. So almost mirror images in 10th grade math. Then 11th grade, what we'll see is the students who are socioeconomically disadvantaged performing slightly worse when it came to the winter administration of the math STAR assessment. Any questions about that? Okay, next up, we're going to take a look at English learners. So these are students whose native language at their home is not English, and their parents at some point in their educational career indicated that on a registration form. And when that happens, the students are classified as English learners, and they'll continue to be classified as English learners until they pass an assessment called the LPAC, which is administered annually, and also score proficient, good grades in their English classes. So this is taking a look at how our English learners performed on the Reading STAR assessment. And so what we see here is if we compare 6th grade, significantly more students scored at a standard not met, and significantly less students scored at a standard met when we compare all of our students to our English learners in 6th grade. In 7th grade, significantly more students scored at a standard not met, and none of our students scored at a standard met or exceeded in 7th grade when we compare our ELs or English learners to all of the students in 7th grade. And that pattern kind of continues to play out in grade 8. None of our students who are English learners scored proficient, whereas nearly 30% of our students did amongst all of our 8th graders in reading. In 9th grade, even more drastic because none of our students scored proficient and nearly all of them scored at a level 1 or not met. And so that's a little bit disappointing to see. Grade 10, we see also a drop off. All of our students, only about less than a quarter of our students are in that standard not met category, whereas the English learners in 10th grade, half of them on the Reading STAR assessment scored in the standard not met category, and none of them scored at the standard met or exceeded. And then in 11th grade, similar story. Overall, our students, about a quarter of them scored in the standard not met category who are not English learners, but nearly 2/3 of our students, 62%, 63% scored in the standard not met, and none of our students scored in the standard met or exceeded category for our English learners.
So Josh, do you have this same data from 3 years ago?
We do.
Pre-pandemic. How does this compare to the last set of pre-pandemic data?
It's more stark. I will say in previous years when we've shown the MAP assessment, which is a different assessment, but yields very similar results, it's norm referenced. We've paid more attention just to grade level performance, like I showed at the beginning of this presentation, and we didn't pull out and focus on just our particular subgroups that I'm showing here. But we do have that data and we could compare that. I would say overall that these particular subgroups are showing worse performance than they did pre-pandemic comparatively.
Yeah, that's why I asked. I mean, I would think that distance learning and then transitioning back to on-site learning would be hardest on English learners than any other kid.
There's so many components to it when you really get down to it. I mean, yes, and I completely agree with you. And I think that, and we'll see that, I think we're going to see that bared out more and more as we start to see data from around the state when everyone takes the CASP exam in the spring and we look at our results that particular subgroups were impacted considerably more than other subgroups when we look at the test results. All right, math, English learners. So again,
Josh, could I chime in for that last slide?
yes.
My impression of SEBA is that you are fairly aggressive about transitioning students from English learner to fluent English proficient. So what is this population of students actually doing over the 6th to 11th grade? Is it a population of students that is shrinking every year because some kids are classifying out of English learner, which means that the population of kids that are English learner are probably having a lot of different challenges because and one indicator of that is that they're not able to reclassify?
Yes, I would say so. Just for numbers, and we could do another presentation about this. We've been lauded for our reclassification rate. Sometimes we've exceeded 20% of our students who are English learners reclassifying, and that's considerably higher than both the state and county averages. And I think our number will dip this year. I think we will still have quite a few students reclassify. So I think when you're looking at this, it looks stark. I mean, it does. There's no other word to describe it. And it's also a little bit of like the student was classified as an English learner. They're probably going to perform poorly on some of these standardized assessments for reading in particular, and it usually carries over into math as well, because there's considerable language in math as well. So it's a little bit of a, are we defining them by this, and therefore we're going to see these results? But I think what we would want to see, just like with students with disabilities and students who are economically disadvantaged, are we seeing growth over time in these students? And that's what this is, a snapshot in time, but it's start to compare these two groups. But it'd be interesting to see, okay, within these groups of English learners who are scoring poorly per this metric, how are they doing? Are they progressing? Because we have taken a much more concrete approach this year to it. We have a designated ELD class daily that students attend for 30 minutes. We also have a designated ELD class that's for middle school. And then for high school, we have a separate class altogether that the students attend for designated ELD. So I would hope that by the end of the year, we'll see some of the fruits of that effort to support our students who are English learners.
But my question is, in 6th grade, you're going to have a number of English learners, and I think what you were alluding to is SEBA's got a good record of taking those English learners and helping them reclassify to fluent English proficient. Once they do that, they're no longer part of that population of English learners. So how many English learners are you talking about in 6th grade versus kids who are still English learners in 11th grade?
Yes, so approximately 3/4 of our 6th graders, or 60 out of 75 of our students, are English learners in 6th grade. By the time we're in 11th grade, we're talking probably 15 students, if that, 10 students. And so I see your point now. I didn't understand what you were getting at first, Michael. So again, that is a little bit, again, thank you for saying that. So it's contextual. We're seeing a lot of students. We should maybe put the number of students in these bar charts, because over here, while this doesn't look good for our English learners in 11th grade, there's a lot fewer students in that category in 11th grade overall compared to 6th grade, where 2/3 of our students are categorized as English learners.
Right, and another thing too that we maybe could track is, I know when we were working with consultants in developing like our charter document, our SARC, our LCAP, is tracking what they call ever English learners, like any student who has ever been an English learner, so you can actually see the progress over time.
Yeah.
Because whether or not they're reclassified, they still show up as someone, as a student has ever been an English
Mhm.
learner.
That's also true. Thanks, Daniel.
Yeah, good point.
Okay, so we see the reading scores here for our English learners. And then math scores, I think I went back one. But it's pretty consistent. The English learners perform more poorly compared to the overall student demographic in 6th grade, again in 7th grade, in 8th grade, comparing the two, 9th grade, 10th grade, and 11th grade. And I think your point is it looks more stark in some of these grades, like you look at 10th grade compared to 10th grade ELs. But part of that is over here, we're talking 60 plus ELs to over here, we're talking maybe 15 ELs. So the students who are still classified as ELs at this time, they're now what we call a long-term English learner and maybe not progressing as we would like to see per these standardized test metrics.
And the fact that they can't, make the reclassification criteria means that they undoubtedly have a lot of other challenges that are holding them down.
Right, they're struggling for sure.
Right. All right. Then finally, our foster and homeless youth outcome. We put these two, they're really separate target subgroups. We put these together because we have total few students, and so we just have them in the same group. But in 6th grade, per the data we had as of December 15th, we didn't have notification of anybody qualifying, so we can't compare those two grade levels in reading for that group. In 7th grade, we can see that our students who are either foster or homeless actually performed better. So we see less students in level 1, about the same in level 2 or nearly met, slightly below in level 3 or standard met, but then significantly more students who are foster or homeless youth scoring in that standard exceeded category. So interesting numbers there. 8th grade, even more stark. It's interesting to see the numbers. We have 40% of our students scoring standard exceeded amongst our foster and homeless youth. Part of this also, only about 7% of our students are classified as foster and homeless youth. So depending on the grade level, like here in 8th grade, that looks wonderful and we should celebrate that. And also that could be
5 students.
Well, and one student scoring
Out of 5.
exceeded, and then the other 2 falling somewhere down here.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, we see, I mean, across the board, we see that our foster and homeless youth are actually performing better, generally speaking, than our students overall. And then in 9th grade, consistent. Actually, there's a slight drop off in 9th grade. Consistent at students not met. More students qualified and are categorized as standard nearly met versus, and none of the students were scored as proficient or exceeded in 9th grade. 10th grade, what we see is about the same number of students scored at a standard not met, slightly less students scored at a standard nearly met, but then a significant increase in the students who are meeting the standard. So you can see 40 compared to 31 and 4 over here. Then finally, 11th grade, we can see that students scoring a level 1, significantly more in our foster and homeless youth. And then levels 2, 3, and 4, it's more split with about 32% of our students meeting the standard or exceeding the standard versus about 31 or so, 31 and change for all of our students in 11th grade. And that's for reading. And then in math, it's a similar story. 7th grade, we're looking at our data, all of our students here, less students scoring at a standard not met, slightly more scoring at a standard nearly met, and then considerably more students meeting the standard in 7th grade for our foster and homeless target subgroup compared to all of our 7th graders. 8th grade, even more so, 60% of our 8th graders who are categorized as foster homeless youth scored standard met or exceeded according to the STAR exam in math. In ninth grade, different story. We have 100% of our students scoring at a standard not met, which is obviously worse than our ninth graders overall in math. 10th grade, slight decrease in our students scoring not met, and a considerable increase in students exceeding the standard in 10th grade amongst our foster and homeless youth. And then finally, 11th grade, where we see also a growth there, where we have less students scoring in a not met category, about the same, scoring nearly met, and then considerably more scoring at the standard met or exceeded. And that wraps up our STAR assessment results. Before I go on, I've got a few more parts of my presentation, but they'll be much more brief. Could we have maybe a 5-minute conversation about what further, like if I was to present this again and say, after our final administration, what data points would you like to see added to this or changed about this presentation?
One would be the N number, the number of students that we're talking about.
Okay.
And Josh, can you also in the next presentation add the percentage of students like that are students with disabilities, foster and homeless youth, just the percentage?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that input. So now I'm going to go back to my head of school update and just finish out with a few more things. And these, I wanted to put these in here because they've been pending for a couple months, and I just wanted to get some conclusion to them. So MTSS stands for multi-tiered system of supports. And there we're going to look at behavior, academics, and social emotional supports for students under the MTSS system. One question that came up at the previous 2 board meetings was the difference between a minor incident and an office referral. We went over this with staff on day 1 of our PD, and now I just wanted to update the board as well. So we're classifying minor incidents as non-suspendable offenses. They'll be reviewed daily, and if a behavior warrants admin assigned consequence, that's something that the person entering that minor incident can choose. An office referral is going to be a suspendable offense, as that is categorized by the Ed Code. And those offenses are going to be listed in the drop-down menu, and that will also automatically get an administrator's attention to follow up with that particular student. We have reflections for students who have behavioral incidents in the classroom or outside of the classroom. And basically how we're doing it is we have a tardy reflection on Wednesdays. We have a uniform reflection on Thursdays and a behavioral reflection on Fridays. So that's one way that we respond to student behavioral incidents.
And what does a reflection look like?
It is, it varies by student and by the incident at hand. So they'll receive a question, we'll get some data about like, okay, you were tardy this many times, or this happened in this class. They need to write about what happened, why it happened, and then what they can do to change that. And the reflection forms are going to vary based on what the particular incident is.
Are they in detention when they're writing their reflection?
We don't use the word detention, but they are. It does. They are in a classroom and they are reflecting on their behavior, usually a day or 2 after the incident occurred.
Got it.
So we have lots of incidents, and I did a snapshot of our most common incidents. There's over 20 types of incident types, but I just wanted to get some of our more common ones up here. And basically what you're going to see here is total number of incidents. So we had 1,180 incidents of tardy, but that went down Q1 to Q2. So that was a positive. Mask issues, we had 225 mask issues logged. but we had fewer mask issues in quarter 2 compared to quarter 1, albeit just 15, but still, that's a win. Disruptive behavior, that 2 fewer, so about even, but still, we went from 254 incidents of disruptive behavior in quarter 1 to 252 in quarter 2. And then as we fall out here, the rest of these, we're seeing an uptick in those type of minor incidents. So we saw more dress code issues in quarter 2, 90 more to be exact. We saw 84 more incidents of wandering and loitering in quarter 2 compared to quarter 1. We saw 65 more incidents of defiance, 59 more incidents of cell phone violations, and 47 more incidents of Chromebook issues. When we look at this, a few things come up. Like, it's one thing to have it happen, it's another thing for it to be reported. So as the last 4 to 5 weeks of quarter 2, we would have focus sessions where it's like, this week we're going to focus on following the cell phone rule. Next week we're going to focus on following the uniform rules or whatnot. And so, like, when I see the cell phone incidents being up, it's because we had a real big focus on that, and I could see maybe people would be even more prone to writing these incidents into educators' handbook. I also think that there probably were more cell phones out in quarter 2. But we want to track this over time, and then hopefully, if we're successful in the initiatives we're implementing in MTSS, we'll see more of these teal boxes, and we'll start to see fewer incidents overall, both minors and office referrals as we progress in the school year.
Josh, with minor incidents, do they involve an administrator, or are they expected to be managed by the instructor?
Great question. Generally, they're for data tracking. If a teacher wants input or administrator intervention, they can choose that action. They can say, administrator, please assign a consequence for whatever it is that they're writing in there. The administrator will review that and then assign the consequences appropriately. But generally speaking, it is managed by the teacher.
So let's say there's a student that violates the cell phone expectation.
Mhm.
Does that student go to their reflection session? Can the teacher assign the student to a reflection session, or is that only done by an administrator?
That's only done by an administrator. So we can keep eyes on that. And then for that particular one, what would happen is the teacher would say, okay, your cell phone was out in class, please give me your cell phone. And then the teacher would pass that cell phone along to the administrator. If it was a particularly difficult situation, the administrator might have to intervene instead of the teacher to take the cell phone. But then eventually the student or really their parent needs to come by and pick up the phone either the day after up to a couple weeks after, depending on how many times it's occurred for the
So
particular.
if there's a cell phone violation, but the teacher does not request administrative support, it still gets logged and is included in this data count?
Correct.
Okay.
All right, so then going on to our office referrals. So this would be the more serious category. There was a lot of overlap between minor incidents and office referrals in the first semester. And I think that was why this request for delineating between the two was made. So I tried to highlight the bigger office referrals here, and you can see just looking at this, all of these are suspendable offenses as well. So it's consistent with the definition that I shared earlier. So starting off with some highlights, we had a number of physical altercations in quarter 1, 8 total students involved in physical altercations, and we were able to get that all the way down to 0 in quarter 2. So very proud of that. And I'm glad that that is working now. And the students who were involved in those physical altercations really are doing really well. I see them interacted positively with their peers and with adults in the building consistently. So that's great to see. Drug incidents. So this would be either a student bringing drugs, nearly always it's marijuana, to school, or a paraphernalia. So maybe something related to that. We had 2 fewer of those incidents in Q2 compared to Q1. Inappropriate sexual behavior, we went from 8 incidents in Q1 down to 1 in Q2. So that was a big improvement. Weapons, we went from, well, actually there was no change. We had 2 incidents of weapons in Q1 and 2 incidents of weapons in Q2. I do want to point out, just as an aside, sometimes like weapons, that sounds like, oh man, is that a gun? No, it's not a gun. It can be anything. In fact, one of them was like a nail file, which the student should have had at school, but it was also not to the like weapon can be, I guess my point here is the weapon can be, it can cover a lot of different categories of objects. So we had no change there. Defiance, we had more students engaging in acts of defiance per educator's handbook, 12 more to be specific. Obscene acts, we saw 11 more. Property destruction, we had 14 more. A lot of these are coming from the bathrooms. The bathrooms, there's no way to see the students while in the bathrooms. Obviously, we don't have cameras in there, and so a lot of times there is property destruction occurring in there, and that's been really frustrating and been an issue all year long. It's related to the TikTok trends that I've shared emails about, where they say on TikTok, go do this at your school, and then share a photo of that. And so we've seen a little bit of that happening. Bullying, we saw 7 more students involved in bullying incidents in Q2 compared to Q1. 6 more students engaged in roughhousing Q2 to Q1. That'd be the one student referral on here that is not suspendable offense. Sexual harassment, we had more sexual harassment incidents or office referrals in Q2 compared to Q1, and then intimidation as well. So that is an overview of our office referrals for the fall semester. Any questions or comments?
That's interesting data.
Yes, I'm really hoping that we'll see, I'm going to do this again at the end of this semester. I'm really hoping that we'll see a lot of growth. I'm feeling really confident, and we'll see what comes up. Then
One
finally,
thing that would be interesting to look at or to understand would be, say in fighting, and there's a total number of 8 students. Was that 8 different students, or was that 4 students who got into problems 2 times? And then another thing would be, where these problems are happening. Are they happening in classrooms? Are they happening on the yard? Are they happening while passing between classes?
yes.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you're right, Michael. In our educator's handbook is our system to track all of these, and there's actually a spot in there where you can choose what location it's happening. I don't think that we're not emphasizing that data point, and so I think there's going to be some inconsistency there, and we haven't really explored that as of yet, but that would be something to take a look at moving forward. So I appreciate that suggestion. Were you going to say something, Larry?
Well, I was just going to ask if the number of kids, if 8 kids for fighting, was that 4 separate fights that were one-on-one, or were they?
It was
Was there a
basically,
fight with multiple kids?
yeah, 2 fights involving multiple kids.
Okay.
So if it's, let's say there's an altercation between 2 people and somebody else comes in there and shoves somebody, okay, you're getting in that list as well, if that is what happens.
Josh, I'm just curious to know this. So the total number of students would be middle school and high school. Is there a breakdown of like just middle school and just high school?
We could definitely do that. We didn't do it for this presentation, but yeah, so you want to see like fighting, middle versus high, all of these middle versus high.
Yeah, that'd be interesting to see if there's more discipline issues at the high school versus the middle school.
Yeah. Anecdotally, it was fairly consistent, but yeah, definitely, maybe that's a suggestion. We could break it down. Referrals or incidents by middle school and high school for our next presentation of this data. It's a good suggestion. Okay, and then suspensions and expulsions. So Here, I do have it broken down by middle school and high school. So we had 11 students suspended in middle school in semester 1 and 16 high school students suspended semester 1. And our numbers for both of those went up comparing quarter 1 and quarter 2. So 7 students for middle school in quarter 2 compared to 4 and 10 compared to 6. Total suspensions in semester 1, 26. Expulsions, we had 2 middle school students expelled in semester 1 and 2 high school students expelled in semester 1. And that fell out. There was no change, 1 and 1 for quarter 1 and quarter 2 in middle school. And we had 2 students expelled at the high school level in quarter 2. So we had an uptick there. So, not great data to look at. We're at the midway point in the year, and I'm hoping that we'll see our total suspensions dropping in the second semester and our total expulsions dropping in the second semester. All right, and that wraps up my presentation. Any other questions or comments before we move on?
All righty. Thank you, Josh, for your report, and thank you, Daniel, for yours also. Very informative. We now move on to the consent agenda. And is there anything on the consent agenda that anybody would like to pull off for further discussion? Not hearing anything. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Larry. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Javier. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed say, oh, I guess I need to do this roll call, don't I? Michael Jones votes yes. Javier votes yes. Larry votes yes. And Gershom votes yes. Did I get that correct?
Yes.
I think so. Good. All right. Let's see. So we're down to action items now. So revised first interim budget.
Yeah, Michael, I don't know if you want to provide a bit of context on this in terms of what you received from the district. I did make a mention about a memo that we received from the district that pointed particularly to our multi-year projection for 2022 and 23 school year and 2023-24 school years. They did have some items in there that we did clear up, and we have a revised attachment to this this board agenda item that identifies the multi-year projection that we presented to the district and amended. So Paul's here to give us a bit of context on some of those responses that we gave to the district. But if you don't mind bringing that up.
The memo or the budget?
I guess maybe since it was addressed to Michael, maybe if Michael could just address, touch on the memo and inform the board so that Paul has the context.
Yes, I got a notice from Josh, an email with a copy of a letter that was addressed to me. And then shortly thereafter, I got an email with a copy of the letter addressed to me. And I got it in the mail as well. So obviously, Mr. Clint Rucker, the new chief business officer of the Powder Valley Unified School District, wanted to make very sure that I got this information. So there were 7 points that he brought up, and they all had to do with different aspects, different points in our budget. I'm not going to go through all of them. I think the one takeaway that I came away with was the issue of how we are going to project our enrollment in upcoming years. And they were making a recommendation that perhaps we wanted to reconsider what we were projecting and perhaps scale it back down. And I think what we saw in the earlier presentation, that even prior to the pandemic hitting, there was a drop in the number of applications SABA was getting. And I know that coincided with a drop of enrollment in the district at large. So when we sort of put together the pandemic, the economy, and social trends that were already in effect, I think that projection for future enrollment is something we need to take a very close look at. I don't know if there, Daniel or Josh, if there were any other points on here that you thought were worth bringing up.
I'll let Paul answer particularly to some of the assumptions that we made outside of enrollment. I kind of brought forward my enrollment update today to look at the last 5 years because I wanted to bear the point that the enrollment number that he saw for this school year was I think it was 510 or 511. That's just a snapshot in October. We're at 518 right now. So that's merely a snapshot. For him to say that it might, I don't know if he infers that it's a bad thing that we're projecting our enrollment to be up next year. We try to start the year off and we do our best to keep our enrollment close to 525. So right now I can say that we're at 518. For us, that's a difference of 5 or so students. And I can say that I have heard, from the district in our county that there is a projected decline in enrollment over the next 2 years. But I did my enrollment presentation just to show that, hey, SABA's enrollment is pretty consistently anywhere between 515 to 520, 525. But you do bring up a good point that that our enrollment, our applications from which we use to backfill our enrollment when we do lose some students, those applications are going down. And yes, that is a risk to our organization that me and Josh are looking at very carefully and seeing what we can do to bring the application numbers back up, see if there's anything we can do differently to reach out to the community to make SABA's name, to bring SABA's name out there so that we don't necessarily have to worry as much about declining enrollment trends in the overall district.
The one thing I'd say about that is that, since SABA's inception, and for that matter, any charter school in the Pajaro Valley, there has always been tension and a certain amount of, how would you say, negative energy over the idea that, oh, these charter schools are stealing our students. And that was when the district had an increasing enrollment every year. I'm concerned, following on to the early concern I expressed, is that going forward, the declining enrollment is going to become more significant in the district at large, and that will feed further acrimony between charter schools and SABA specifically and the district, as their, because as their enrollment goes down, they then have to reduce their budget, which means laying off people and eliminating positions. And if they open up their newspaper and see an ad from SABA saying, "Come to SABA, we're a great school, we'd love to have you join our school," there are elements in the district that will point to that and say, see, those evil charter schools are at it again. They're trying to steal our students and wreck our district. So I think it has not only financial implications for us, but also political implications. My 2 cents.
Okay, well, I think in the interim, what can we control? I think we just need to push on trying to get those application numbers up. we're putting together a plan that I'm hoping will yield close to 200 applications this year. I did a check as of last week. We're at like 75 or something, so not a bad start. And I think what we're going to try and do is we have a few people who attend church regularly, and we're going to make some statements at the end of those church meetings, just kind of getting the word out about us, and maybe look at either some Facebook or Google ads as well. So hopefully we'll see those and application numbers tick back up. Any other comments on the revised first interim budget?
I mean, I would just invite Paul to give us, I guess, a summary of some of the changes that we made to our multi-year projection that we presented to PVUSD in response to the memo and the questions we were presented.
Thank you. I'll keep it really quick. I know you guys have been going through a lot. So the current year stayed, there was no change to the current year. But as we dug in, I found there were some issues within the model, the way it calculated things that skewed expenditures. So I corrected those. For example, under employee benefits specifically, there was several, it was mentioned about employee benefits. The jump in employee benefits didn't make sense. So I found an error there, and that was pretty significant. It was $200,000. And we took that out, and the multi-year you have now, given the enrollment is 515 for the 2 out years. With the adjustments made, it shows that the program is certainly a viable, very viable program long-term. It just adjusted some really formulaic kind of issues that our budget model had that we hadn't discovered yet, and I've corrected those. So if you went to the next page, I think you'll see the full budget. So you can see here. So we corrected what was the overstatement in benefits, and you can see it kind of evened out the net revenues at the end of the year. And the growth only went from 510 to 515. But this was reflecting a loss, and that again was due to some formula errors. My apologies. We had shifted people back and forth because I had to deal with some family issues. It's not an excuse. We should have dug in and seen this in our budget model. But this is a pretty accurate reflection now of what things would look like. So, and now that we know, moving forward, those have been corrected.
Thank you, Paul. Any other questions regarding the first interim budget? The revised first interim budget? Not hearing any questions. This is an action item, which means I guess we need to approve it. So can I have a motion to approve the revised first interim budget?
All right, I'll move.
Thank you, Larry. Do I have a second? Thank you, Gershom. Michael Jones votes yes. Larry, how do you vote?
Yes.
Gershom?
Yes.
Javier?
Yes.
Did I miss anybody? Yes, that's it. Yeah, that's 4. So a motion passes. Thank you very much. Let's move on to the school accountability report card.
Okay, so annually in the January, February, well, by February 1st, each LEA or local educational agency, which is oftentimes known as a district, is responsible for producing a SARC or school accountability report card. The SARC or school accountability report card is 20 to 30 page document that goes over all of the data information about a school. So our particular SARC goes over, as a public charter, description of our school and our mission statement, our enrollment, our demographics, and then how we're performing in terms of annual test scores by demographics, like we looked at earlier, adoption of instructional materials, how well or whether our facility is in good working order or not, pupil outcomes. And so if you looked at this in the agenda, we see our performance, and then we'll look at a lot of the data that's in this SARC when it comes to reviewing our LCAP goals for the year, which we'll do in May, before we update our LCAP in the June time period. So some of the performance metrics on pupil outcomes we'll take a look at from the SARC report and report out. So I am requesting the board to approve our SARC for the 2021 school year tonight.
And you're asking us to approve it without having a copy of it to look at?
So I guess I'm happy to show it. Does everybody have access to our board docs? Because all of the documents that I take to the board are in this, so we should all be able to click on that ahead of time, but I'm happy to share it right now.
When I click on the school accountability report card, there's no attachment there that I see. Does anybody else, do other people see it?
Let me look. I see the same thing, but I might not be logged in. Let me log in and take a look.
No, it should show up whether you're in public view or not. There.
Okay, then yeah, it's not showing.
Is this something that needs to be approved tonight?
Yes.
Oh, it shows up under executive content, so we probably have to move that over.
Okay, I'm doing that now. Send over. Save. Hold on a second. Okay.
I can give it a shot.
You can do it. All right.
Yeah.
I can pull it up to here. Oh, that's so funny. I'm gonna share my screen right now again. Computer is freezing. Okay. So this is our SARC, and like I was describing, it gives our contact information, description of our school.
I see your desktop, but I don't see any document.
Okay, give me 1 second.
Okay. The link in our chat should have the public version of the board doc site. If you're either logged in or if you're at this public version of the site, you should be able to click on the public content now and see this document. And Josh has it in front of us too.
Okay, so can you see it now, Michael?
Yeah.
Okay. So about the school, we go over contact information, school description, what's involved in our school, and our mission statement and how we carry it out. Our enrollment, our demographics, male and female, and ethnicities and races. Our authorized teaching assignments, and this is all for years in the past, so it's not for this school year. So this particular table is looking at 1920.
So Josh, I'm familiar with what a SARC is.
Yeah,
I was just uncomfortable approving something without actually seeing it. I see that there is the SARC document in existence. And I would encourage all of us to go online and to review the entire document at a later time, but I'm comfortable going ahead and making a motion to approve this year's SARC. If there's a second.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Larry. Larry, how do you vote?
Yes.
Michael votes yes. Javier
yes.
and Gershom.
Yes.
All right.
Looking at this, just reminds me that Javier, I need to get in contact with you so I can get you set up with a Board Docs account. So you can log in and see all these things. Most of this stuff is public anyway, but just to get you a login.
Sounds good.
You might check my login too, because I wasn't able to. I guess I got into the agenda and I see the, little icons that show there are attachments, and I can click on those attachments, but it sounded like you think that on some level, there's a SARC document on here to look at, and I don't see it. So I'm not
Yeah,
sure
I
what's
don't
going
either.
on.
I don't see it either, Michael.
So
Okay,
some challenges there. But let's
Right.
move ahead to the 2021 Saba Public Schools single audit and Saba Public Schools audited financials.
okay, so this one, so we received a draft audit last week, and then at 5:27, so 3 minutes before this board meeting started, I received an email from our auditor, Robert Arredondo. And he shared that we could review what's attached in this board packet. And that there are currently no findings. But the single audit testing for the foundation is still open, pending some support from DMS. Otherwise, they're not anticipating any major changes to our audit. So this is due February 1st to the state. I think we can send it to the state without board approval. Our next board meeting will be February 1st. And so far it's looking really good. It looks like we don't have any findings. And what he shared with me tonight is now in that board packet, and you can review it. And I will bring this back in February for an official approval by the Saba Board of Directors. And you can see even in the report itself, it says tentative for discussion purposes only. So it's been a little bit of a struggle here. I think part of it is we have a single audit this year. We received considerable sums of money in terms of one-time funding, and many schools, including Saba, are receiving a single audit as a result of that. And so they've looked at even more items than they usually do. And it's taken a little bit longer than it typically does to get the final audit from them. Them being CLA or Clifton Larson Allen. Typically, our audit's available the first week after December. We get it approved by December 15th, and that's wrapped up. So it's okay. We'll take it back. I'll bring this back in February 1st, and we'll get the approval at this time. At that time. Any questions about our single audit or our audit of our Saba Public Schools?
I have a confession to make,
Okay.
and that is when I went to the agenda, I was expecting, that there'd be a little icon that showed there's an attached document. For school accountability report card, there was no little icon. But when I clicked on school accountability report card and it opened up on the other side, there was a document there. So my apologies, it was my confusion, but I guess it's a matter of getting used to board docs.
I was equally confused, Michael.
Thank you.
Okay.
So you don't need us to vote on this tonight, Josh?
No, I've been anticipating the results of this audit for a while now, so it seems like we're like inching along here. But we can vote on it next meeting on February 1st.
Because we still only have, is this only a draft?
Yeah, it's just on the back, you can see it's tentative for discussion purposes only. So
Okay.
In your free time between now and the next meeting, you can go through the audit.
Will do. Okay, that brings us to our last action item, which is the academic calendar.
So this one, we made a mistake on our academic calendar, and it was a minor mistake, but we've let our community know and all our teachers know, and now we're memorializing it by taking it to the board meeting. And basically what we did is we knew there was three-day weekends in the third quarter yesterday, and then 2 in February, but we had the 7th and the 21st as being quote off. And it was the 14th and the 21st off. And so this gets us back in line with the PVUSD 3-day weekends as well. So basically, the only change to this is the calendar did indicate that the February 7th was off. And now this is reflecting that February 14th is off. All other items on this academic calendar are the same.
Very good. I'd like, any questions for Josh regarding the calendar? And I'm going to go ahead and make a motion to approve the revised edition of the 2021-2022 academic calendar for Saba School. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Gershom. Michael Jones votes yes. Javier, how do you vote?
Yes.
And Larry, how do you vote?
Yes.
And Gershom, how do you vote?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. And that brings us to closing items. Is there anything that anybody would like to see on our next agenda?
So far, I have the audit, the finalized audit. What else? What else do we talk about? I don't think there's anything else from this meeting.
There's more, we talked about edits to how we show our data for the next time we look at that, probably, you know, whether it's behavioral referrals or STAR scores for at the end of the semester.
Very good. Okay. Without further ado, then, I'd like to go ahead and adjourn the meeting, and we will see each other next time.
Thank you all.
All right,
Yeah.
you guys.
Have a
Good
good
night.
evening.